Hi everybody, it's Mark from MT.TrainRestorations. I just wanted to introduce a new project. I recently picked up a Lionel 254 pre-war engine, olive green. It's in pretty good shape for its age. This was made back in the late 20s, early 30s. Probably, I'll look it up, but I think it's 20s. And it sputters a little bit on the track, but it does get power. It does move, but we want to find out what's making it sputter. And I'm sure it needs cleaned, maybe brushes, and the usual. I looked at the wiring, and the wiring is kind of cracked up, burnt with age. This is very common. So what we're going to do today is take it apart, look inside, see what it needs, and then we'll go from there. How's that? So let me zoom in a little bit, get you back on the table, on the bench, and then we'll zoom down in here and see if we can get a good bead on what's going on for everybody can see. So let me, don't mind my little doily. I use that just to cushion some of the fragile parts as I take things apart. But what we'll do is take the screws out that hold the shell on the two ends, and then we'll see what we can see inside. So I hope everybody had a good holiday. I haven't been able to do a video over the last month or so. And so hope you had a good Christmas and made it through the New Year's, and we're into a new year now, 2021, and hopefully it will be a better year than 2020 was. We shall see. Oh, the lever right here, this lever is a manual switch for the engine to go forward and reverse. Take that little brass handle off, then we can lift the shell off, other than the wire for the light. It's got a little metal tab that kind of holds that in. Let me bend that out of the way a little bit, and we will pull on the contactor, and see, that's what actually makes the light work. You can see that it fits up inside that slot, and this little contactor right there, wire to the engine, is where the light bulb gets its power. So we'll let that dangle, and here's the one for the other side. It's missing a light over here, as you can see. The pentagram is bent, but it's fixable. We can straighten that back out, but the body is really good shape. There's no dents. There's no severe rust or anything like that. I mean, for as old as this is, it's in really good shape. So we'll set that aside here for now, and put that with it. Actually start a little plastic bin here for parts. As you can see, the insulation on the wiring just falls off. It has been toasted over the years. So we will open that tab up a little bit. That's what the bracket looks like inside. This is kind of what holds that contactor into the light fixture, and part of the light fixture that fits in this slot is actually jammed in that hole. So we're going to replace all this wire anyway, so what we're going to do is kind of cut that off. We can save that part. Actually, we'll take this little screw out of here, loosen that up, get this old wire off of it, save that part, throw that away. So as I figured, you know, it's getting power, barely. It's probably shorting out here and there because of the wires, as being as brittle as they are. So we'll take care of that. And so with that said, let's take the screws out of the side which hold this into the frame. These little screws right here. There should be 1, 2, 3, 4, but I see there's only 2. So one on this side, one on the other side. We'll save these definitely. Take this one out. These are original screws. Again, kind of amazing. But two were lost or missing, so who knows what happened to those. Now this also, yeah, that's the switch that moves manually. You can see it goes back and forth, and that's what makes it go forward and reverse. So we're going to take this out of there and drop that down, save that screw. You can see the hole is square, and that corresponds with the switch that has a square tab on it which fits in there. As you can see, this is square. I think you can see that. And that's what holds it in place. Once you screw it down, it gets its ground. And boy, these wires are pretty shot. But I think the switch is usable. We'll clean that up, put some new screws in if need be, or just clean the screws up. But pretty good shape. I'm kind of happy with the condition that is. Like I said, I'm going to replace these wires anyway. So what we're going to do, it's not a bad idea if you've not worked with these switches before. As you can see how they go in, square hole, lines up. You want this facing towards you or where it comes out, and there are 4 screws. That is one for the brushes. There'll be one for this top brush, one for the bottom brush, and you can see where they go. They go on opposite corners, just like the power and the ground go on opposite corners. So you want to keep that consistent. So I'm going to use different color wires, which really makes it easier. But these 2 brush wires are white and broken up. So they go here and here. Then you have your ground, or your wire goes to this side of the coil, magnetic coil, and the other part would be the hot line. So you can see this comes out, and it comes right down in here from the bottom of the contactors. So we're going to have to do a lot of work on this, because we're going to have to resolder a wire on the back of that, so on and so forth, unless I can salvage a piece down there. But we'll see. We'll get going on that. Like I said, I'm going to cut this switch off, and that way we can clean this up, take it apart. You can see which one the ground. Usually the ground or the power line has a little washer. Gives you an indication of which tab, and then the power, or the other side of the power source also has a washer. And then the 2 brushes are usually without a washer. And they, like I said, they are on diagonal corners from each other. So make a note of that, or draw a picture if you need to on a piece of paper with this facing you, and you can see, you know, which sides that you need to put the power and the brushes on. It's helpful. I've done so many of these now, so I kind of got the idea. But just in case you folks have not done this yet, this will show you how. And as you can see, the 2 brushes, wires are there. They're in bad shape. Let us open this up. Keep your finger down on it. If you remember, it'd be a good idea. Take these 2 screws out of the brush plate and kind of just keep it tight for a moment with your hand until you get the screws all the way out. Save these screws, and then lift up gently, because the screws are the brushes are spring loaded. And let's see what kind of surprise we have in here today. Alright, well, the brushes aren't bad. I mean, they still have a lot of life in them for their age. They look like original brushes. Yeah, they are. They're in decent shape. I'm not sure what this piece of paper is in there for. There's an old piece of paper. Oh boy, it's a piece of newspaper. I wonder what age this is. Ain't that something? Let's see if we can find some kind of a date on That would be hilarious to find that. Wow, it's almost transparent from the oil. Look at that, FDR something. FD, oh, it just disintegrates. FDR. Missouri voters except for something as a, isn't that something? This has to be, well, I think FDR took office in 33. His first term in 33, went through the war. So this could be from early 30s, or he won election, I think, 4 times. Wow, that's something. Amazing, amazing. They used it as a shim. Here's a little washer they also used as a shim. So this has not probably been opened up since the 1930s. So as you can see, the armature is here. It's in good shape. It's dirty. It's a little worn. I can feel a little groove around it. So it's in pretty good shape. Let me get the rest of this off of here. So anyway, the brush holders and spring look pretty good. I mean, it's all grubby, greasy, dirty. That would help it run terribly on the track. It was getting power, trying to get power. It just could not get through the grease, or maybe shorten out. So we'll get rid of these. Get rid of those wires there. This is an important wire to keep intact, because we won't have to try to dig out some wire from the coil here. You got, this is where this is soldered on. This wire's not too bad a shape. I think what we'll do, we'll probably cut it shorter, add a new wire, because this one's a stranded wire, and there's only a few strands actually hitting there, so we want to make sure we have good wire on here. So I'll probably have to replace everything down to its source. Everything is pretty filthy. So with that, let's see, I'm going to put this aside. All the parts seem to be here. You know, you got your simulated air tanks and your journals with the wings on both sides. Your little ladder, little brass ladder. You got both of the couplers. And it's kind of amazing that this isn't bent or mangled up at all. Whoever had it kept it on the track pretty well. There's a little bit of rust up in here, so we'll probably clean it up a little bit. I don't know. I don't really want to strip this down to bare metal and start over with paint. I think the original, even though it has some scuffs and chips, I'd rather keep it original. We can clean up the brass and make it shine. I still can't get over that little piece of paper with FDR on there. Wow, that's amazing to me. What's it say on this side? Boy, I really can't make out too much what it says, but amazing, very amazing that that piece of paper in there is 90 years old, close to 85 to 90 years. So what I'm going to do is take a good look at these wires and see. I don't need, these are both hot lines coming off of the roller assembly. I really don't need both of these coming out of here. They had one for the light itself and one going to the switch, which you don't need both. I can jump off the switch for the light. So I'm going to see which one of these is the best candidate to perhaps save, and then I will just connect a better, longer wire to it and use some shrink wrap to go back down in there to the source of the solder where it's soldered onto the plate, and perhaps do that. I'll know more once I take this apart. I don't want to make that mess here for everyone right now. I will do that is clean this up. I use a contact cleaner, electrical contact cleaner, which I found was a pretty good way of degreasing all this. You can see all the years of black carbon buildup from the brushes all over the armature. If you take a good look at this when I come back, hopefully it'll look new. The wheels on this, I've not really seen these kind of wheels in Lionel history so far. I'm not saying that they're not original. They look original. They could be a aftermarket wheel back in those days, but it's a red solid wheel, but it has a simulated spoked assembly on these. It's hard to see, but what leads me to believe is there's some paint still on the axle, which has not been broken away from removal. So I don't know. I don't know if these are the wheels have been on here for the last 85 years or not. They look like they've been here a long time though. So we'll find out more as we go. But I will disassemble, take the wheels off, take the gears off, clean the armature and the coil, the filled coil, everything. It's just filthy, dirty, greasy, and has caked on layers of dirt from over the years. So I'm going to do that. Looking at the brush plate, it's in really good shape. Physically, it just again needs a good cleaning. There's a lot of residue. The wires that broke down left a lot of, you know, debris behind. So what we'll try to do is take these loose, take what's left of the wire off of these, and the same thing. I'll clean these. I'll soak these in a little bit of I use CLR solution, which gets rid of calcium and rust and so on and so forth. And I'll do that to this. And I don't do it long. I don't soak these kind of parts long because I don't want the fiberboard to get saturated. I just want to get it clean. The metal is in pretty good shape. Once it's buffed up on the wheel, wire wheel, it'll be like new. So that's the plans for this brush plate. The switch, however, even though it's in really good shape, it's not warped. A lot of these get warped over the years from the screw being tightened too much. It warps at each one of these screws and almost looks like a waffle over time, but this is in pretty nice shape. So I do have some screws here that I'm trying to get loose, crack loose. This one's fine. I think this one's fine. This one I put a little bit of, it's a little snug. It turns the whole assembly, so I should be able to get that off. This one here is pretty rusted. These two are rusted pretty bad, so I may have to use a Dremel tool to cut the groove, recut the groove in here, where I can get this screw off. But I will do that too offline and let you know, show you when I come back what that came out like. I think I do have some parts for these. So for the moment, that's what I'm going to do. That's my plans. I will take this and degrease it and clean it up and so on. Then I will be back and show you where we stand and see once it's reassembled if it runs and if it runs good enough. And we'll put some wires on, change that stuff out, and we'll go from there. So until I'm back, talk to you soon. Bye-bye. Okay, I'm back, and I wanted to continue where we left off. Like I said, I took this all apart, took the wheels off, cleaned them up, cleaned the drive gears, so on. They were pretty cruddy. Axles were pretty greasy. So if you remember what this looked like, this is the gear side, the armature side. We got the commutators pretty clean. They're back to shiny copper. Like I said, they do have a little wear, which is understandable after almost 90 years or so of running. So we got this cleaned up and degreased. The brush plate, if you remember, was pretty corroded, but you know, I cleaned this off with a little degreaser, a little alcohol, little wire brush, and it's in good shape. Good shape, pretty good. And then the switch, the pendulum switch, which switches back and forth from reverse to forward and so on. Cleaned it up. I actually had some rusted screws. Didn't know if I was going to be able to save them, but I did. They're all working fine. And like I said, this is in really good shape. And so what the next step is, what I wanted to do, like I said before in the beginning, we had a couple wires coming off the roller assembly for power. We had two wires, one for a light and one for the switch. I weaved them together, and what I'm going to do is they're good solid wire, stranded wire. They have a good solder to the roller contact. I don't know if you can see that in there, but what I'm going to do is I have some 1/16 inch shrink wrap, which I'm going to put down inside here and all the way down to the bottom till the shrink wrap touches the solder that holds it down to the roller assembly. And I left a little bit sticking out. So what I'm going to do with that is I will connect here to our hot lead, and we'll go from there to the switches and the light and so on. Now on this end, I cut some of that original wire off. This is a braided piece of wire. It's got a good connection at the other end of the coil, and I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to get a little piece of the shrink wrap and measure out a piece here, and we will get that ready. That way it won't be rubbing up against anything that it shouldn't be. So what we'll do is we'll make sure this is going to fit nice, and it will. That way we have a good insulated wire down to the assembly to where it's soldered on, and we'll continue wiring from here out for the negative side and so on and so forth. And like I mentioned before, we have two other wires to consider, one for each brush. So we have the hot side, negative side for the switch, which hot and negative, and brush. And once we wire that in and connect it to the frame, we'll install this back into the frame, into the square hole with the lever sticking out this way. Actually, it's hard to see without the lever. This screws back in. It's brass. It's a brass trim piece. I'll clean this up too for a final when we're done, but that's what that will do. That will stick out of the engine body over here when we're finished, and you will push it forward and for backward, and that's how that works. So we'll put this back in there. We have that. And to make it a little simpler, we're going to cut a piece of wire for the hot side. We're going to cut a piece of black wire for the negative side for here. And I'm going to use yellow for the brushes. It doesn't matter if it's two different colors. When you look up in there and see new wires, two yellow wires, you'll know that two are for brushes. One goes there, one goes there. It's not that difficult to remember. So we'll give it enough slack to make sure that we have from a brush plate that screws onto there. We'll do those things right now. Make sure we have enough slack that we can get the assembly put back together, which I think to this size will be enough. We can always trim a little bit off if we need to. And we're going to guesstimate here a little bit and cut some of this. So we got, save that. Now the power's already on this side and the switch will be around here, so we will have enough there for that. And the negative's coming from the other end, so we'll make sure we have enough for that. If I can find an end here. There we go. Just got some wire, some new wire in from my supplier, my trusty supplier, Jeff Kane. up in New York at the traintender.com. He's my parts guru. He supplies me with 99.9% of my parts and supplies. Great guy, great source of information as well. So we got wires cut. Again, we have, this wire was left over from the light assembly, which we have 2 light assemblies. So we'll probably run both light assembly wires together and connect it to a power source, and then we will go from there. I will make a connection here, solder them up, and then we'll have wires for both lights. I may even jump one from the other inside the cab and then come out with one lead. I really haven't decided that yet. I just want to be able to get the motor to the point where we can try it, get it running, and see what we have. So that's the next step. So that's what we're going to do. And I will take these wires, strip them, solder them, we'll shrink wrap them in place, get them connected. Like I said, I'll probably, the original brushes they have a lot of life left in them, but you know, since I have them out, I may just put new brushes in. I think we have new brushes in here someplace. Let me see here. I'll have to dig through my parts bin here for brushes, but I'm sure we have some new ones. I'll put some new brushes in, or you know, I may use these. It's hard to say, but we're going to see if we can get this to the point where we can reassemble the wheels and get those back on, and get some power to it, and I'll be back in a little bit. Okay, I took a couple liberties while I was off the air, and I completed the wiring as we discussed earlier. New wires on the brushes. I made them both yellow. Not a big deal. Brought the coil wire up for the neutral, and we added on to the existing positive wire coming off the roller assembly. It was a good solid core wire. The solders were good, so I used those. And as you could see, I redid the switch. Got 2 hot leads coming off the hot. The black is the neutral, and the 2 brushes. So depending on which wire you put to what brush is what guides the lever. I like to put the lever forward when I'm going forward, and I like to have the lever backwards when I'm going backwards. So if you want it the other way, you can change these 2 brush wires, and all that does is just change the direction of the switch. So where I left off with the lights, if you remember, the original light was there. The other original light was gone. I have a new old stock cast light fixture, but you could see it's a little bit smaller than this. I believe back then they used the cast light fixtures off of some of the standard gauge trains, Lionel. This is a O gauge, but the standard gauge that was very similar to this, I think it was the number 8, could have been a number 8 or the number 6, I'm not sure which model number, but they had the bigger cast lights. So anyway, temporarily until I can find one of these somewhere, I got this one on here, and I put a red bulb in it because it's the back bulb. No big deal. I have clear ones and green ones and red ones. I put a red bulb in it. So I also, like I said, we had the contactor for both lights. The one that was missing, the contactor was just sitting inside. So I was able to salvage that. I salvaged the original. I used as much original everything as I can. I didn't really replace much other than the wiring. So we're going to solder this up and put a little shrink wrap down in there and wire after I do that. We cleaned the brush plate, cleaned the engine out, took the wheels off, cleaned those. I'll clean this up a little bit, clean the rollers a little bit. But we could do this real quick. We'll solder this up, and we can put it together a little more and see if it runs. How's that? See if it runs on the track. I'm pretty confident. So I will. Oh yeah, I think we got a little bit on there. Hold those three together. I put that out of the way for the moment. Sit that down. Yeah, so I'm going to put these wires, I pulled them back a little bit out of the way. I get them a little bit closer to the joint where I like it. Push this shrink wrap down in here to cover up our solder joint a little bit. I like to do that. So as you can see, we got that, and what I use to heat that up with, it's a little less evasive than some of the other things guys use to heat these up, but just use my little Craftsman heat gun. Does a nice job, doesn't hurt anything. Just wave it around a little bit. It'll shrink up that shrink wrap as it should be. And we got a good solder joint. We have the wires protected, no bare spots showing. And so that is that. That should feed both our lights off of our positive terminal on our switch. We got a couple more screws here to put in, I believe. I just set this in here and I didn't even snug these up. I had two screws were existing and two were not. So I'm putting in what we have that will line up. There we go. Got another one in here. There's 4 screws that hold this frame to the chassis. And like I said earlier, the existing had 2, which worked. I mean, it held it together, but we might as well put in all 4 when we can. And you can see it left a little bit of slack, so when someone takes this apart in the future, it will stay together. Have some room to work. I'm going to throw out a couple of these new ones. I like these newer screws here. I'll throw out another one here. It's a 436 thread. And let's see if we can see this hole here. Oh, there we go. Okay. Let's see if I can get that in there. My eyes aren't what they used to be, but we got it. So we'll get this screw in here, and I believe we can use a similar screw to hold the shell on. So what we got to do now is take this brass handle off the switch, put our body on, make sure we have it in the right position. We can put a screw in the end here, hold the body to the frame. There we go. Snug that up. Let's try another one. I like these. And they're black. They're blackened, so they're not as obvious going in, and you don't see them that much. So let's see if I can find where the, excuse my elbow. Okay, here we go. Found it. Not too bad. Get that snugged up. Okay, there, nice and snug. So, what that says, my goal was to make this the front, and the lever, let's clean it up a little bit before I put it back in there. That way we can see it real easy when we're operating the train. Get it shined up a little bit here. Got to hold on to these pretty tight. Be careful. I've had them shoot right out of my hand, and that was the end of that. You find them about a year or so later when you're cleaning or moving something or sweeping up. You find them when you don't need them. So you just want to get the lever screwed back into the little hole here. There we go. It'd be better if I could see it. There we go. Snug that back up. So right now, being in the middle like it is, that should be neutral. This should go backwards. This should go forwards. And what we're going to do is we're going to set this up on the track and try it. So give me 1 minute and I'll get us positioned over there on the test track. Okay, here we are at the test track, and we have the 254 sitting here. So put a little power to her here. Gets the lights are working, so the soldering we did a little bit ago seems to be working okay. So we have power to the lights, and it's in neutral. So let's see what happens when we put it in forward. Ah, very nice. Here we go. Wow, I'm barely touching the power. Yeah, turn it down a little bit. Don't want it to fly off the track. Running pretty smooth. So let's see. How about reverse? Wow, very good. I like it. It's running very well. Now I put a little oil to it after I took it all apart and degreased it all. Obviously what lubricant there was on there was baked on. There wasn't much there. It was full of dirt. So after it was all taken apart, I put some new oil on the gear, on the armature shaft. So I think we're all good shape. I oiled up a little bit on the drive axles, and it's running very smooth. So we'll come around here real quick and shut that down, put it in neutral. Maybe just throw the lights on it here for a minute. So obviously our project was a success. If you remember, we took it apart, opened it up, found that the wires were all baked and cracked up and shot. So I replaced all the wiring, and we put in new brushes. We cleaned the chassis, we cleaned the armature, the filled coil. Actually, we just cleaned everything. I used a electronic cleaner to soak and shoot through and cleaned everything out. It looks brand new inside, actually, with all new wiring. And if you remember back when I started, I found a little newspaper clip in there, a little clipping of newspaper folded up and wedged behind the screw on the brush plate. Well, I found out the reason why that person put that in there. They had that little piece of paper folded up and a little thin metal washer as a shim. When I put the motor back together without those pieces in there, it would short out. So I found out why. Both brush holders, when screwed to the chassis with the brush plate, the two holders actually just touched the chassis enough that it would short out. Not sure why. The brush plate looks original. It looks pretty good shape. It wasn't bent. But that person, that owner, found out that they needed to have a little bit of space there, so they shimmed it out with that news clipping. And as I said, what I read on that short little piece of newspaper was there was a story about FDR with voters in election and so on, which kind of aged that piece to 1933 when he first won his first election. So that could be in there. That could have been in there all those years, all the, since 1933. So I did find out that this was created 1927, 1928 with the body style and the frame style that I have on this piece. They were made between 1924 and 1933. And I narrowed it down to, I believe this one was manufactured around 27, 28. So I was lucky enough to pick this piece up at Tons of Trains, Ken Berlin's place, up in Fountain Hills, Arizona. I don't live too far from there. And unfortunately, Ken passed away last year at the age of 86. He'd been running trains for a long time. I've known Ken for quite a while now, and since his passing, his grandson and his grandson's brother-in-law have taken over the business, and they're trying to make a go of it, which are doing pretty well so far. They have a lot of stuff up there. Me and my friend Hump go up there every chance we get. We try to pick something up every time we go there, and I was lucky enough to find this engine up there, which needed a lot of work, as you saw in the video. But after we're all done here, we got a nice piece. It works very well. So I just wanted to conclude that was our project this time around. We got this thing running. It's in great shape, good for another 90 years, I hope. And we'll see on the next journey. I don't know what that'll be yet, but just watch on YouTube. My email, MT.TrainRestorations@gmail.com, if you'd like to email me a comment or two. And you can find me on MT.TrainRestorations on YouTube. And so it's Mark saying goodbye for now. Until next time. Bye-bye.